Oh.
The Mysterious Traveler.
This is the mysterious traveler, inviting you to join him on another journey into the realm of the strange and terrifying. I hope you will enjoy the trip, that it will thrill you a little and chill you a little. So settle back, get a good grip on your nerves. Where are we going? You'll find out when we get there. I hope it's not making you nervous being alone with me here in the dark. Darkness stirs strange terrors in some minds, for the things that happen at night are sometimes most upsetting. Things such as people who vanish suddenly, as in the tale of the ugliest woman alive. I once met a woman who confessed to being the ugliest woman alive, and yet I thought her beautiful. She told me a story so strange, so incredible, that most people would have thought her insane. Yet I believed her. It all began a year ago in a small house in a lonely section of the Hudson Valley. The house lay hidden in a grove of trees, and at each window the blinds were drawn, as though to protect someone within from the outside world. From one of the darkened rooms came the deep, bitter weeping of a woman.
What is it?
It's your cousin Richard, miss. He's here to see you.
Send him away. I don't want to see him. I thought I told you I don't
Forgive
want to.
me for breaking in like this, Gloria, but I've come to see you as your doctor, not as your cousin.
Are you sure you haven't also come to borrow some money to shower on that beautiful, stupid wife of yours?
Now, you haven't any right to talk about my wife like that.
Oh, I speak as I please. If you don't like it, get out.
Your servant, Martha, tells me that you're in constant pain. You better let me examine you.
Oh, I don't want to be examined. There's nothing you or anyone else can do for me.
Gloria,
Oh,
you can't go on this way year after year, shutting yourself off from the world and everyone, never leaving this darkened room. As your doctor, I can't be responsible for the consequences.
as my doctor? You're all a pack of frauds. Ever since childhood, it has been one operation after another. And look at me. I'm even more ugly and deformed than I was after the accident.
Now, Gloria, I can understand how you feel,
You
but
can't understand how I feel. You, do you know what it is to be so ugly and deformed that you can't bear to look at yourself in the mirror, to have people shudder when they see you?
well, if you just didn't think about it so much, you might.
Oh, how can I escape thinking about it when every moment I am racked with pain. What have I got to look forward to? 20 or 30 years of pain and darkness? I'd give all these years, all of them, just to be beautiful and well for 6 months.
You mustn't lose hope, Gloria. Perhaps another operation in the future.
Oh, you're lying. You know that no operation can help me. I'm doomed to be ugly and deformed as long as I live. There's no use pretending. Oh.
Here, let me look at you.
Oh.
You know, your heart can't stand excitement.
I'm all right. Just leave me alone.
You're not all right. Look here, Gloria. In your condition, you need a doctor to live here and look after you. Now, a few days ago, I met an old teacher of mine, Professor Hadley. I'm sure I could prevail upon him to accept a position here.
Oh, he'd be just like the rest of them. Promises. Nothing else.
I'm sure you'd like him. And he was once considered the most brilliant neurologist in the country.
What do you mean, was once considered?
Well, at the height of his career, something no one seems to know about changed him overnight. He took to drinking, and as a result, lost his position at the university, his practice, just everything.
In other words, he's an outcast, like me.
Yes, I suppose you might say that.
Well, then what better place could there be for the professor than this house? It was built for outcasts. If he...
So, early one evening, a week later, Professor Hadley arrived. Martha, the servant, led the professor to her mistress's room. The professor looked about the darkened room, trying to find the figure of his new employer.
Evening, Professor. But I prefer it this way.
My dear Miss King, we'll have to see each other sooner or later. And this is as good a time as any. Now, where's the light switch?
No, I don't want you to turn it on.
Ah, here it is.
Professor, you'll have to learn that my wishes come first, not yours. Why do you keep staring at me like that?
Merely professional interest.
Well, why don't you say it? I'm hideous. The ugliest woman you have ever seen.
Do you have a glass? I dislike drinking out of a bottle. Here's one.
What's the matter, Professor? Is my ugliness such a shock that you need a drink? I suppose you're going to tell me what the rest of them have? That another operation might make a new woman out of me?
No, Miss King. I, for one, will not delude you. I'm afraid no operation can help you.
Get out! Do you hear? Get out! Get out, you drunken fool!
Forgive me if you can't stand to hear the truth. I have difficulty facing it myself. So I escape through drinking.
Anyone can see what I seek to escape. But what do you seek to escape, Professor?
Memories, Miss King.
Oh, you're a coward, Professor. A person can overcome memories. But what can one do with a face and a body like mine?
Believe me, my memories are as terrifying as your appearance. Strangely enough, they were brought about as a result of trying to help people like yourself.
You were trying to help people like me. How?
Does it matter? You might say that I had a dream of the future as only a scientist might have, and as you can see, I failed.
I I should like very much to hear about it, Professor. That is, if you don't mind telling me about it.
But I do mind, Miss King, just as you mind being stared at. I trust you don't object to my drinking.
No, Professor. Not at all. Go right ahead. Meanwhile, we can talk. I'm more than interested in what you have to say.
Well, Miss King, pioneering doesn't pay. I was a famous doctor and teacher, but then I decided to pioneer in a field as yet untouched by science. I accepted the challenge of the unknown, but I failed.
But what was this experiment you engaged in, Professor?
You wouldn't understand. Even men of science, men who should have understood, didn't believe it could be done.
Well, tell me about it. Perhaps, perhaps I will understand.
It is generally believed that when a man dies, his body becomes worthless. But that isn't true, for science has already been able to make use of the dead.
Make use of the dead? Uh, How?
By using the parts of the eyes, the dead for the living blind. The eyes of the dead have provided sight for thousands of people who were doomed to eternal darkness because they lacked retinas.
In other words, um, the dead supplied the living with missing parts.
Yes,
And and that was what your experiment was about.
it was along those lines. As a brain specialist, I felt that this remarkable step in science could be carried still further.
Carry it still further.
Yes, as a brain specialist, I quite often had young patients who were doomed to die shortly because of brain disorders. Think of what a waste it was, burying those fine young bodies.
But what good were those bodies to anyone?
What good were those bodies? Well, surely, my dear Miss King, you could do with a new body. Look at you, ugly, broken, a human wreck.
Uh, yes, yes, I see what you mean. Um, but how could it be done?
Well, according to my theory, your brain could be transferred to another woman's body, a woman who had died of a brain disorder, but was otherwise organically sound.
My brain transferred to another woman's body.
Yes. Outwardly, of course, this woman would continue to live, but it would be you, for it would be your brain that would be the master of the body.
Oh, you mean I would live in another woman's body, a young, beautiful body.
Ah, yes, yes, that was the theory.
Oh, Professor Hadley, it's more than a theory, isn't it? You've tried it out, haven't you?
It's still unproven theory, Miss King. The experiment failed.
Oh, it failed.
Yes. And my assistant paid for my failure with his life. It was his brain I tried to transfer to another body.
But you still believe in your theory, don't you?
Yes, I believe in it. But my pioneering days are over. I know the time will come when some brave young scientist, who are more fortunate than myself, will prove that I was right.
To have a fine, beautiful body. I'd give the rest of my life just to be young and beautiful for 6 months. Professor, Professor, would you... Professor... Oh, oh, you're asleep. Well, when you awaken, we'll have a talk. A long talk.
And all through the night, the professor slept off his drunken stupor. And all through the long night, an idea beat in Gloria's brain, beat with an ever increasing intensity, an intensity that could scarcely wait for the professor's awakening in the morning.
Oh,
Oh,
good morning, Professor.
what? Oh, it's you, Miss King. I seem to have fallen asleep on your couch.
Oh, that's quite all right. Do you recall the talk we had last night, Professor?
The talk we had, only vaguely, I'm afraid.
Oh, you told me about your experiment and the unfortunate assistant who died.
I told you about that? I'm afraid I was quite drunk, Miss King. I trust that you didn't take what I said seriously.
Oh, but I do, Professor. And there's no need for you to deny what you told me last night.
Very well, Miss King. Then I won't deny anything. Let's just forget about the entire matter.
Oh, I have no intention of forgetting about it, Professor.
What do you mean?
Well, you tried to prove your theory once, and you failed. Now I want to try a second time, using me as your subject.
But that's impossible. I couldn't. Not after watching my assistant die. I've lost my nerve. I'm through.
Oh, Professor, evidently, the police never found out about your assistant's death, or you would have lost your license, been sent to prison.
You mean you tell them?
I shall tell them, but only if you refuse to do as I ask.
But you don't comprehend the risk involved. I'm only working on a theory with the odds 1,000 to 1 against my succeeding.
What do I have to lose? 20, 30 years of pain and ugliness. I am more willing to gamble those years for a new body. I'd take the chance even if it were only for 6 months in a young and beautiful body instead of a lifetime.
But so many obstacles. I'd need a laboratory such as was never seen before with special equipment, instruments. It would be extremely expensive.
That wouldn't matter. I am quite wealthy.
I need an assistant. I can't operate alone.
I can provide you with one.
Well, most important of all, At the time of the operation, I'd need the body of a woman who had been dead only a few hours from a brain disorder.
I promise that you will have her, Professor, and anything else you need.
Oh, it will be difficult. Most difficult. Tremendous odds against us. Of course, it would.
Oh, come, Professor. I am willing to take the chance. Why not you?
All right, I'll do it.
Weeks passed. Weeks in which boxes and crates were constantly arriving at the house. Weeks in which workmen came from the nearby town to assist the professor in building his laboratory. But at the end of the month, it was complete to the last detail, and the professor announced his readiness. It was at this time that Richard, in response to a letter from his cousin Gloria, arrived at the house one evening. Gloria, what's going on here?
Hello, Richard. Sit down, won't you?
Gloria, what are you up to? Why have you furnished this house with a laboratory and an operating room? Why, you must have spent thousands of dollars on all this equipment.
Yes, Richard. I have.
But why? Professor Hadley wouldn't tell me a thing. He just kept referring me to you.
The professor has a theory, Richard, which we intend to put into practice.
A theory?
Yes, Richard. The professor is going to attempt to transfer my brain into the body of another woman.
What? Are you mad? It's never been done.
That's quite true, Richard. But there's always a first time for everything. Why not now?
What? Nothing like this has ever been attempted. It won't work. I tell you, it won't work.
Perhaps not. But look at me, Richard. What if I have to lose? No matter how great the odds, I'm going to go through with it. And you are going to assist the professor in the operation.
What are you saying? I have no part of this madness. Why, if I did, I could lose my license. I could have it taken away from me.
You could also have your fine home and car taken away too, Richard.
What do you mean?
I hold the notes of yours amounting to $30,000, Richard. If you act as the professor's assistant, those notes will be torn up. If you don't, I'll collect them to the last penny.
I don't seem to have much choice.
No, Richard, you don't.
Very well. I'll serve as the professor's assistant.
Good. If you'll join the professor in the laboratory, he'll give you the details about the entire operation.
All right. But I still think the whole thing is madness.
The fool. He doesn't even realize I'll go mad if I remain the way I am. This operation is the only chance out. Oh, that must be the girl. Yes,
Miss King?
yes. Oh, good evening. Good evening. You must be Jane Arnold.
Yes, that's right.
I've been expecting you. Come in, won't you?
Thank you. It's rather dark in here.
Oh, forgive me. Forgive me for not having any lights on. They bother my eyes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Won't you sit down? You'll find a chair by that desk where you're standing.
A chair? Oh, yes, here it is. Thank you.
If you like, you may turn on that desk lamp.
Are you sure it won't bother you?
No, no, no. It won't bother me in this corner of the room.
All right, Miss King. There.
Oh, oh, you are beautiful. Oh, even more beautiful than your picture.
Thank you.
Of all of the applications I received for the position of my secretary, I like yours the best, Miss Arnold. As I recall, you mentioned in your letter that you haven't any relatives?
Yes, that's right. I'm quite free to live here with you. In fact, Miss King, I'm rather anxious to leave the city.
Oh, well, that's fine. Now, as my secretary, your main job would be to write personal letters for me. Do you have a nice handwriting, Miss Arnold?
Um,
Suppose you take a letter that I dictate. You'll find a pen and some paper in that desk.
yes, here it is. Okay, I'm ready, Miss King.
Good. My dear Professor Hadley, this letter will serve as an agreement between the two of us for a sum of money which has already been paid me. I hereby agree to lend myself to the experiment you are engaged in, well aware of the consequences. I signed this of my own free will. Jane Arnold. Have you got all that, Miss Arnold?
I signed this of my own free will, Jane Arnold. Yes, it's. Why, I signed it. You didn't want me to, did you, Miss King?
Yes, yes, yeah, very much so. I'd like to see what your signature looks like.
Oh, I see, but.
What's the matter, Miss Arnold? Are you surprised at what your new employer looks like?
No, it's just that I.
Perhaps I am hideous, but I won't be like this for long. Soon, oh, soon I'll be just as beautiful as you are.
I've changed my mind, Miss King. I don't want the position. I want to leave.
I'm afraid that you can't, Miss Arnold. I have other plans for you.
What do you mean? What have you got there?
Oh, just a hypodermic, my dear. A few seconds after you receive this, My face will never frighten you again.
No! No! Stay away from me! Don't touch me with that!
Now, there. It's all over now, Miss Arnold. That didn't hurt, did it?
What have you done to me? I feel so dizzy.
Why don't you just lie down here? Just lie down.
Don't touch me. I have to get out of here.
Oh, she's beautiful. Beautiful.
Miss King. Miss King, did I hear someone screaming here?
I'm afraid that you just imagined you did, Professor.
Who's this?
Gloria, who's this girl? Why is she unconscious?
Yes, that's right. She's the one we are going to use in the experiment.
But Miss King, this girl is still alive. You were supposed to supply me with a woman dead a few hours from a brain disorder.
Well, what's the difference, Professor? This young lady is a hopeless case. Tumor of the brain. She only has a few more months to live and agreed to the experiment provided I took care of her family.
But why is she unconscious?
Well, naturally, I thought, well, the thought of dying terrified her, so I gave her a hypodermic. We both thought it would be better that way.
I can't proceed with the operation until I have this girl's permission.
Oh, well, that's all been taken care of, Professor. Here's a letter she wrote just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, this seems satisfactory.
You ready to proceed with the operation, Professor?
Yes, everything is prepared.
Good. Then I place myself in your hands, Professor. I too am prepared for life or for death.
A little while later, two figures were on the operating table. One young and beautiful, the other ugly and deformed. Professor Hadley prepared for the operation as Richard placed a mask on the face of one of the two patients and turned on the nitrous oxide. A few moments later, at a nod from Richard, the professor picked up an instrument and began the first operation. The seconds dragged on into minutes, the minutes into hours, as Richard passed one instrument after another to the professor, at the same time watching the machines carefully. Time and time again, when it appeared that all was lost, Richard kept a spark of life alive with adrenaline and oxygen. Hours later, Professor Hadley warily turned from the operating table and slowly removed his gloves. He had done everything that was possible. The rest was up to fate.
What's her pulse, Richard?
58, a little stronger.
Yeah, it's very encouraging.
Don't you think we ought to lie down and rest, Professor? You must be very tired after operating for 5 hours.
That doesn't matter. What does matter is Will she survive?
Well, if she does, you'll go down in history as one of the greatest scientists of all time.
It's only my work that counts. Think of it, Richard. If I've succeeded, it will open up a vast new field of science. By using the bodies of the dead, we'll be able to save many of the living who are doomed to die young.
It is. Professor, her pulse is much stronger.
She's regaining consciousness.
Then, then you've succeeded.
That remains to be seen. She may be blind, dumb, even an idiot. We must be prepared for anything.
Her pulse beat is almost normal.
She's opening her eyes, looking at me. Miss King, can you hear me?
Professor.
Her voice, it's completely changed.
You forget, Richard, that her voice is now of Jane Arnold.
Yes, of course.
Professor, was the operation a success?
So far, it appears to be, Miss King.
Please, let me see a mirror.
A mirror? Yes, of course. Here, I'll hold it for you.
Yes, it's her face. I speak, and her lips move. I'm beautiful, beautiful, not ugly and deformed.
You mustn't talk anymore, Miss King. Your condition is still extremely serious.
You must remember, Professor, Gloria King is dead. I'm now Jane Arnold.
Yes, Gloria King is dead. But now you must be quiet and rest. It will be 2 or 3 weeks before you recover, and then you'll find a new life waiting you.
A new life waiting. A beautiful life. Good morning, Professor. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning.
How are you, Gloria?
Richard, how many times have I told you that Gloria King is dead? My name is now Jane Arnold.
I'm sorry. I keep forgetting.
Professor, it's been a month now since the operation. How much longer must I stay here? I want to leave this house and really begin to live.
I'm happy to say that you're completely recovered. You're free to leave whenever you wish.
Free to leave. After all the years I have spent in this house, I can hardly believe it. But that mirror, it shows me to be young, beautiful. What are your plans, Professor?
Richard and I are going to remain here to finish our paper on the experiment. It will be the most startling scientific work of the century.
Yes, the professor will be famous the world over.
This paper you're writing, will it have names, dates, everything exactly as it occurred?
Well, naturally. It will be a complete record with you as the living proof.
But think of the publicity it would create. Why, it would follow me wherever I went. Make a spectacle of me.
But you can't hide a great discovery like mine from the world.
I should say not.
Professor, I'm afraid you'll have to.
What do you mean?
I'm afraid it may come to you as a shock, but Jane Arnold didn't part with this body willingly.
But you showed me the letter she had written, giving me permission to use her body.
I tricked her into writing that letter, Professor. I never saw Jane Arnold before that evening.
What?
You mean she didn't have a brain disorder? She wasn't doomed to die in a few months?
No, Professor, she wasn't.
That means you tricked me into committing murder.
Come now, Professor. No one will ever know that I'm not Jane Arnold unless you publish your paper in the experiment. And of course you can't do that, for that would publish the fact that you committed murder.
She's right, Professor.
You're very clever, Miss King. Or perhaps I should say Miss Arnold, but in spite of your cleverness, I'm going to publish my paper on the experiment.
But Professor, that might well mean the chair.
That's quite true, but at least I'll die knowing the world knew of my success. That is something worth leaving behind.
It might be for you, Professor, but it wouldn't be for me.
I'm afraid you haven't any choice in the matter.
Professor, she's got a gun.
Yes, I don't like to do this, but you give me no alternative.
Put that gun down. You're mad.
After living ugly and deformed for so many years, Professor, I don't intend to let you publish a paper that would spoil the life I've always dreamed of living.
Give me that gun.
You've killed him.
Yes, Richard, I've killed him.
How could you, Gloria? After he did so much for you.
Gloria! Gloria! You haven't even the sense to remember my name is now Jane Arnold. I'm afraid, Richard, that you too are too dangerous to leave alive.
What are you saying? I'm your cousin.
You were Gloria King's cousin, but you are not mine.
Gloria, how can you talk like that? You can't do this to me. No, don't shoot. I'll do anything you want. Gloria, don't.
Too bad, Richard, but I had no choice. You were the last link between my past and the future. I couldn't let the two of you live, not with what you both knew. Their bodies. I must get rid of them. Cover up everything. If I burnt the house down, yes, that's it. I'll burn the house down and everything in it, including the ugly and deformed body of Gloria King. Then I'll be free. Free to live as Jane Arnold.
An hour later, Jane Arnold waited impatiently at the small village station for the arrival of the train that was to take her to the city. As she happily walked up and down the platform, she heard the siren of a fire engine and watched entranced as it flew past her and out toward the country. Suddenly, she smiled for she knew where the fire engine was going, and it would be too late. A few minutes later, the train to New York arrived, and Jane boarded it quickly. As she walked to her seat, she felt the many admiring eyes that were watching her, and suddenly she was indescribably happy. Mile after mile, the train raced down the valley, bringing her closer and closer to the city and a new life. As Jane handed the conductor her fare, she realized the contents of the bag she carried were unknown to her. One by one, she began to draw objects from the bag. There was a compact, a comb, a handkerchief, a wallet with $40, and a driver's license. Jane Arnold, 445 West 106th Street. So, that was where Jane Arnold lived. And the keys. One of them must be the key to her apartment. She stared for a moment at the objects in her lap, then smiled. The contents of the bag were Jane Arnold's, and she was now Jane Arnold. A few hours later, she entered a small apartment house on West 106th Street and went to apartment 20.
So this is it. The key looks fairly worn. Perhaps this is the door key. Now the light. The switch should be near the door. Yes, here it is. So, this is where Jane Arnold lived. Or rather, where I live. It's a rather dismal place. But the mirrors, at least I no longer need to fear them. Oh, I am beautiful. It's been worth everything I've been through. Even if I were to be young and beautiful for only 6 months, instead of for years, it is worth it. Who could that be? I must be careful. I know nothing at all about her.
Oh, Janie, this is better than Christmas morning. I thought you were never coming back. Aren't you even going to say you miss me?
Miss you?
What are you staring at me for? You remember me, don't you? Dan, the guy that lives across the street. The guy who's in love with you. Who wants to marry you.
Oh, of course! Dan! It was just, well, I was surprised. We haven't seen each other since, how long is it now?
Exactly a month. Every night I kept looking up at your window, praying there'd be a light showing. When I saw it tonight, I couldn't believe it.
I arrived just a few minutes ago.
Where were you, Janie? Why didn't you write? Just because I proposed? Well, that wasn't any reason to disappear for a month. Why'd you do it?
Oh, please, Dan. Let's not discuss that now.
All right, dear. And I promise I won't propose again. I don't want you disappearing for another month.
I won't.
Why do you keep looking at me like that? As though you've never seen me before.
Do I? It's just that I'm so happy to see you.
Oh, Janie, it's so wonderful to have you back. What do you say we go out and celebrate?
Oh, Dan, I'd love to.
Hello, darling.
Hello, Dan. Come in. I had a wonderful time last night. I was never happier.
Well, there's no reason we can't have a wonderful time tonight and every night. You know, somehow that month's vacation you took made a change in you.
Did it? For the better, I hope?
Yes, it was for the better. Now I'm sort of glad you took that vacation.
Why, Dan?
Well, you know how moody and upset you were for those few days before you went away?
Was I?
You certainly were. And when I proposed to you, you just burst into tears. What was wrong, Jane? Can't you tell me about it now?
Wrong? I don't know, Dan. I mean, I'd rather not talk about it. It's all in the past now.
Is it, Janie?
Yes.
Then, if I were to ask you to marry me again, you wouldn't run away, would you?
The only way I'd run would be towards you.
Then, Janie, will you marry me?
There's nothing in the world I'd rather do.
Oh, Janie! We're going to be very happy together.
Yes, I know we are. Happier than I ever dreamed possible.
And Jane, or Gloria, was happy, deliriously happy, for the next few days. Then Dan met me on the street and told me Jane was back in town again. So that evening I dropped in on her at her apartment.
Hello, Dr. Smith. How are you? Come on in.
Hello, Dan.
Look, Janie, it's Dr. Smith. I met him this morning and told him you were back. He kept asking for you all the time you were away.
Hello, Janie. How are you?
I'm fine, Doctor. How are you?
Well, I was quite worried when you disappeared.
You needn't worry anymore, Doc. She's back to stay and we're going to get married.
What? Is that true, Janie?
Yes.
What's the matter, Doc? You look awfully upset. Don't you approve?
Why, yes, of course. Congratulations.
Ah, thanks, Doc. And seeing as you've been such a swell friend to Janie and me, we'd like you to be our best man.
I should be very happy to. Dan, would you mind very much if I were to talk to Janie alone?
Of course not, Doc. I've got to be running along anyway. I'll be back in an hour, darling. Then we'll take in a movie together.
All right, Dan.
See you later, Doc.
Of course, Dan. Jane, I was very much upset when I heard that you had disappeared.
I was all right, Doctor. I just felt the need for a vacation.
Well, yes, of course. Things being the way they are, I can understand your desire to get away for a while. But I can't understand why you're agreeing to marry Dan.
My agreeing to marry Dan?
Well, yes. Have you told him?
Have I told him?
Well, from the tone of your voice, obviously you haven't. Jane, once you had the courage to face him and refuse to marry him, why have you changed your mind?
Well, I love him.
Jane, I know you love him. That you always have. But you can't do this to him. You can't marry him. Things being the way they are.
things being the way they are...
Of course. You know it wouldn't be fair to him.
Why not?
Why not? But, Jane, we discussed this thoroughly 2 days before you went away. You can't be so unfair to him.
What did you say?
I said that you can't be so unfair to Dan.
What do you mean, Doctor?
Jane, what's wrong with you? You know what the specialist said about your heart? That the x-rays showed.
About my heart?
Yes. Jane, you're so pale. What's wrong? You've known for over a month now that you only have 6 months to live. Why are you so shocked?
Only 6 months to live. So that's why she turned him down. Tried to get a job away from the city. She knew she only had 6 months more to live.
Jane, who are you talking to? I don't understand. Aren't you feeling well?
I'm perfectly well, Doctor. Why shouldn't I be? When I was ugly and deformed, I said I'd be satisfied if I could only be beautiful and young for 6 months. I'm getting the 6 months. What more could I ask for? 6 months! 6 months!
This is the mysterious traveler again. Have you enjoyed our little trip? You say it's impossible to transfer a brain from one body to another? That's what I thought when Jane Arnold, or should I say, Gloria King, told me her strange story. But when she died 6 months later, I performed an autopsy, and I was pretty well convinced that, well, you know, I've long had a secret desire to attempt Professor Hadley's experiment myself. Perhaps you're in the market for another body? Oh, you're getting off at the next stop. I'm sorry. Perhaps you'll join me again soon. I take this same train every week at the same time.
You have just heard a story of The Mysterious Traveler, a series of dramas of the strange and unusual brought to you by the Vintage Radio Today players. These players include Deb Meeks, Cherry Johnson, Carlos Oliveras, and Tracy Allred. The Mysterious Traveler is presented by the Building Block School for the Arts, every once in a while at 6 p.m., live on YouTube.
That's a wrap.
All right.
Woo!